Okay, so let's start today's session. Welcome everyone to today's Flying Stories Zoom meeting sessions. For those of you who haven't been here before, the initiative for this was taken by Badri from Flying Stories during the lockdown, and it's been going on for a couple of weeks, and it's really great. We get to share a lot of information. We've had some really interesting speakers on, and there's been some great sessions. Um, I'm the host for today's session. It's the first time I'm doing it, so let's see how it goes. My name is Debu Choudhry, and today we have a very special guest that I'd like to welcome. Today's topic is going to be SIV, which you all kind of know what it's about. And I think we are super lucky and super privileged to probably have one of the best people in the world to talk to us about this subject. Yeah. We have the Jocky Sanderson. I don't think I need to do a big introduction. I will do a little one anyway to try and compete with Alok's introductions. Jocky doesn't need much of an introduction. We've all heard of Jocky. If you've been paragliding for a while, you know who Jocky is. Jocky's been flying for over 30 years, forever from the beginning. He was part of the British team in the early 90s when he competed. He was one of the top pilots in the world back then, and he is probably the one or one of the people who has actually started SIV and developed SIV and brought SIV to the world, and has taught thousands of people over the years and helped thousands of pilots. He's been a big part of the BHPA as well, and a big part in general of paragliding and developing the sport, and bringing the sport forward to the world. He's also he runs a company called Escape Paragliding, which he's been running for many years. He has done SIV courses all over the world and does XC guiding trips all over the world. I have been very privileged to be a part of his team for the last few years as one of his guides, and it's been a real pleasure to work with Jocky and learn from Jocky. He's also the inventor and the meet director for the Ozone Shabre competition format, which is a friendly competition format where lots of different level pilots get to compete, and there's lectures, and it's a really great concept which has worked very well over the years. And other people have started doing it as well, but I think it was originally Jocky's idea. He has made several movies about paragliding and safety, and those are award-winning movies. I'm sure lots of you have watched all his movies, and I could go on and on. There's lots of stuff, but let's call it there. So welcome, Jocky, and
hey!
Big thanks from the Indian community for taking the time to come and talk to us. It's a real pleasure and a privilege. So yeah, let's get started on the chat.
Okay, hello India, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. So just quickly before we get started about the meeting and the questions, so we'll do it in the usual format. I will ask a couple of general questions, and Jocky can talk a little bit about SIV and stuff. And then once we start the questions and answers, if people can please either raise their hands on the chat or put your questions on the general chat. Don't put them privately to me. Put them in the general chat, and then we'll try and bring your questions up in the order of the queue as best we can. Yeah. Okay. So Jocky, just to get started on this, if you can tell us. I'd be really interested to hear a little bit about the history of SIV, how the idea came about. I mean, I know you were probably one of the first people who started this, and when did it start? How did it come about, and how did you go about developing it and stuff like that?
It came from in 1989. The Europeans, that was when Europe was getting together. And so all the countries had to nominate a pilot to represent them in the testing organizations. And I was nominated by the British. And we all went to Annecy. So Andy Heidegger represented Switzerland and Alan Zoller. Andre Rose was France. And so it was a whole amalgamation of countries that then we did a test pilot academy. And basically the leaders then were ACPLS and DHV. And we just did this academy where we sort of fused ideas and concepts. And then that then was adopted as the European standard. And it was a test program. It was 14 tests, which ranged from deflations to search for stalls and pitch and roll stability checks. And very quickly, I realized that we were doing these testing to check how safe gliders were and to test the handling of pilots and the reaction time of pilots with the gliders. But no one was actually teaching the pilots how to do it. So the test pilots were learning a lot about gliders and roll control and pitch control, but it wasn't rolled out to the pilots themselves. So once we'd set up all the testing program, I thought, well, wouldn't it be perfect just to turn all those tests into structured teaching platforms? So for example, a symmetric tuck test, we just deflate it and see what it does. But that then teaches a pilot how to react and recover from it. So we basically adapted the test format into a teaching format. And that's how SIV was evolved. SIV stands for Simulated Incidents in Flight, which the French version, Simulated Incidents en Vol. And that's because we started it in Annecy, really. And it seemed, obviously, the polite thing to do is the host country has the host language, basically. But yeah, and we all started doing it. And then you adapt it from there. And it evolves every year. It's evolved. The whole training program evolves. And what's great is different instructors come in with different ideas. It's all generally the same. But they have different takes on it. And it's really interesting to listen to other instructors' views on it, which is great. And we all evolve. And our training and the standard evolves with glider development, with all sorts of characteristics. And so, you know, we haven't stopped changing our training every year throughout the whole of this. For 30 years, we've been doing it. But yeah, so it's about sort of adapting and just promoting learning, really. Long answer.
Oh, perfect. That's that was a good that was what I was looking for, kind of. And yeah, how it all started, you know. And yeah, I'm fully with you there. I mean, I've been teaching SIV for a few years, and like you say, it keeps evolving, and we keep bringing new ideas into it, which is great. And as well, I suppose with the different with the evolution of wings, they've got, we follow the same sort of pattern as the evolution of wings. Just quickly, how much more difficult was it, say, in the late 90s than it is now, compared, with the wings that were actually much hotter then? Was it a lot more stressful? Is it less stressful these days with the better wings?
Yeah, definitely. Now the glider design is phenomenally good, and the materials, the designs, everything. It's just it's just a pleasure to teach SIV now, as opposed to before, because before was pretty chaotic. Yeah, with glider design and pitched instability and roll instability, the designers were learning as well, and we were learning fast. So yeah, it was quite chaotic in the beginning, but it's got to a beautiful stage now. And what's really nice is all the SIV instructors are teaching very similar methods of recovery and recognition, etc., etc. Yeah. But in the old days, like when we first tested our pitch test, because the gliders, remember in the old days, in the 80s, the cells were, a foot high, and there was only 9 cells. These things didn't pitch. So to do the pitch test, we used to approach a stall, let go, let it dive, and it only dived to 45 degrees. So we'd brake again, let go, and then it dive and then we'd check the pitch. That'd be our objective way of doing it. But as gliders evolved, so they got faster and faster, then the test pilots kept on hitting the sail. So tests had to evolve to cope with the style of gliders as well. But now I think the tests are brilliant. Sometimes you get the situation where the tail wags the dog when you're testing, like the spiral problems and things like that, locking in. But now it sort of evolves more and more to represent the pilot flying the right style of glider. And so to teach SIV with the right pilot on the right glider is very easy. It's very nice, very enjoyable. But what I will say is no SIV instructor can ever drop their guard. You can never say, oh, this is going to be easy, because pilots will always surprise you with what they're going to do. And you can never not look. You have to be permanently on the radio with your mouth ready to talk, because when we're doing it, I mean, Debu, we've got to see them. So it's got to go into our eyes, up into our brain, down into our mouth. And then it's got to come out of our mouth, into their ears, down to their hands. So the delay is about half a second or more. So we've got to anticipate what they're just about to do. Which makes it interesting. So I never drop my guard. I'm always, you're talking, you're always permanently watching. And it's great because you anticipate, and the anticipation is fantastic. I would say that probably the worst maneuver to teach as an SIV instructor would be search for stall. Because the search for stall, you have to rely on, you're watching the glider starting to drop, you've got half a second to see if they're going to react or not, and then you've got to say release. And that's the release, the one that gets you, because the pitch is huge if they get it wrong.
I agree with you on that one. If you watch back on videos where I've taught and the release comes out in all kinds of pitches, you know, so for sure that's one of the harder ones. Okay, great. One more little a question or something that I wanted you to talk about. How essential or how important do you feel that SIV is in the progression of a pilot? You know, is it something that has to be there or it doesn't have to be there? What's your take on that one, Jocky?
I think all pilots are individuals, and all pilots should learn. It's part of. If you love a sport, if you love anything, you want to get the most out of it. And you reach a stage in your flying where you're held back by the unknown, by the insecurity of not knowing how to control the wing or make it perform properly. So there is a point in your flying when an SIV would be completely advantageous. Flying cross-country, flying in thermals, flying in turbulence, you need to be focusing on the positive, which is finding the lift, centering on the core, staying active with your flying, and not thinking about the glider. And an SIV helps that. It helps you know what to do, how the reactions are, how to cope with it, how to recognize and recover from it if it happens. But it's mainly about prevention, not the cure. So SIV teaches you about active flying. It should do. And so I'd say if you were using flying to just de-stress, to go to the coast, to soar gently, then you don't necessarily need SIV if you don't want to progress. But if you want to progress, if you want to go further, if you want to fly high or in thermals or in good stuff where you want to maximize the day and the conditions, then you need to do an SIV. But a lot of people sort of, the further they go into their career, the more stubborn they become about doing an SIV because they don't want to make a mistake. And it's true, you know, the more experienced you are, the more instinctive you become. But an SIV teaches you a lot of the smaller things, the subtle things. And that's what the understanding is. And I think what we do now is we say, listen, what people are often scared of is, oh, I don't want to do full stalls, I don't want to do this. You say, it doesn't matter. Every course is completely one-to-one. So we would, when they're coming out into the maneuvering area, they're not forced to do any part of the program, and we can focus and build their tolerance up. So it's important that people, the pressure curve shouldn't be tipped when they're doing an SIV. They should be stimulated and learning from it and want to take more and more. And actually, over the sort of the period of the course, they they take more and more information, they enjoy it, and they learn through play, not through having to do it. And I think that's a mistake people make. They think SIV, I have to do it. You don't have to do it. And you can do it in whatever measure you like. And what I'll normally do, a good SIV course, when you finish it, you should be thinking, I want to do more of that. I like that. It was enjoyable and it gave me confidence. That's what it should be doing for the course. So yeah, in answer to your question, SIV, if you want to go far, if you want to do cross country, you've got to do an SIV course. But if you don't and you're happy just soaring, you don't necessarily have to do one.
Yeah, great. Thanks. That's pretty much completely my point of view as well. Same as what you said. You know, when I teach SIV, I take each person individually. It's very important. And you know what I say is that you know you come to an SIV to learn safety and gain confidence, and it's pointless scaring people silly and sending them away more scared than before. So yeah,
definitely. And
great.
The other thing I'd like to say is people think it's about ticking boxes. You know, doing an SIV course, yeah, tick, spiral tick, stall tick, deflation tick. It's not. It's about the whole subtlety of the wing and how beautiful it is. And you get that understanding that the wing just looks after you. The wing is so beautiful, and keeping the pressure on the brakes, understanding the roll, using the roll to pull out where you want it to be and control it. It's so subtle. And a lot of people, they fly for years and don't understand that, and they don't see it. And suddenly when you show them, yeah, look, use the pitch when it dives, use that dive to roll faster, exit wherever you want. And they go, oh, wow, you know, and that, you know, light bulb moment for people is fantastic. And they often say, the people that were in denial and say, oh, I don't need to do SIV, and they don't do it for 4 or 5 years. And then they suddenly do one. They think, oh my God, there's 4 years wasted of understanding how beautiful the wings are. And now the wings are stunning.
Yeah.
And they just do so much. And for me, you know, the pilots just don't do the wings justice. You know, for me, it's like, just let it do its thing. It's so beautiful, and trust it. Yeah. Learn to trust it and get stimulated. You know, give justice to the wings, basically. Pilots are great, but the wings are absolutely bummer.
Yeah. Great. I'm just going to ask you one more question, Jocky, and then are you happy to go on to the questions from people?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Just one more question I had was during an SIV, like you said, you know, most instructors, we all have a similar set kind of program that we do. Is there any one, which is the one maneuver you think is the most essential during an SIV?
Oh my word. That's a
Sorry.
question. Do you know what? Rebooting the system and stalling is the sort of the elephant in the room. And it's not necessarily, it's to know you can do it and to know the forces on your arms and the release points and everything, how to do it generally. It's just that's a good tool to have in your toolbox, to know that you can do it if there's a problem. So that's the major one, and that reboots the system. So if you were thermaling and you had a massive cravat and locking in, if you couldn't stall, you'd have to throw your reserve, which puts you out of the game. But if you can stall and you've got the altitude, you can give that a go. And that might reset, get the cravat out, and then you can go on your way. So that's essential, but it's all about tools. The most, for me, it depends on what you want to do. Do you want to improve as a pilot and understand the wing? Or do you know, for me, if I was to see a pilot taking off, doing wing overs, and doing a turn reversal, which is a 360 one way, pulling out, letting it dive, and 360 other, that shows me everything about the pilot and the understanding that they've got it, the understanding of pitch, roll, and the use of it, and the understanding that when you can and cannot brake, things like that. So yeah, it depends on whether you want the biggest maneuver or the most performance maneuver. But I would say the stall would be the big one. And to know you can stall. And the key is you can do several stalls. Any stall you fly away from is a good one. But you have to do tens, hundreds to be really instinctive and relaxed with it and understand that real subtlety of pressure and release and letting it dive and inflate, things like that. But yeah, I'd say the most important probably would be the prevention, breaking the dive.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that, Jocky. Okay, so let's head on to the questions.
Okay.
And I think I have the first question was from Bhushan, and if I can unmute Bhushan, he can ask you himself, or maybe hello, Choudhry can unmute him.
Yeah, Bhushan, go ahead.
Bhushan, hello, Bhushan.
Hey. Hi, Jocky. Hi. So my question real quick. I wanted to know what do you think is a key differentiating factor between a low B and a high B wing in terms of passive safety and in terms of in general behavior as per current glider design? Let's assume a 100 or 200 hour pilot, fairly competent pilot, is flying both of these wings and their usual average reactions that you see on a typical SIV. So if you could comment on that, thank you.
The difference between low and high end is generally speed of pitch and the speed of roll. So a pilot that's flying a high MB should be very instinctive and very quick to react. And active flying, you'll hear that term active flying used a lot. And I don't think people understand it that much. So they think, oh yeah, tick, active flying, got that. That's just a bit of braking. But it isn't. It's about instinctively flying. And you can see it, you know, when we're doing sort of pieces to camera and you've got booms on us and we're flying along, we're chatting and permanently doing this whilst chatting. And it's all about maintaining the pressure on your hands. It's a bit like a spider having its legs on the web. And as soon as you feel it vibrate, you move. And you get to do that very instinctively. And that's active flying. So you could be in quite an active air movement, big movement of the wing, and you're permanently doing this, not even looking at the wing, just flying, looking where you're going, all that sort of stuff. So when you go into high-end Bs and things like that, you need, I mean, that's just Bs. You need to respect active flying. Low-end Bs, you can be less respectful of active flying, but you still, you know, obviously all people have to active fly. But with a high-end B, you need to be, what we say is it's piloting. You have to pilot it. Whereas a low-end B gets to a flyable state automatically. It brings itself back out and you have less input to do. But you just have to be more respectful of the speed of the pitch and the violence of the roll. That's all. And as soon as you break it and get pressure on both brakes, you've now got control. So you can gently bring it out or bleed out the speed. But the other thing is with the high-end Bs, speed bars are more efficient than low-end. So working on building trust in that as well. And yeah, I'd say that's about it really.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, high-end Bs are a lot more nicer in roll. So, and you'll find, well, low-end Bs are a lower aspect. And so they're sort of, they have shorter lines and they'll turn. But with higher-end Bs, they're a bit more elegant. And it's using that bank and elegance to its maximum is key.
So can we say, even though passive safety is pretty much high on high Bs, they do definitely require a significant step up in terms of the pilot competence of flying those as compared to a low B, for sure?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
If you had a high B doing quite a dynamic deflation, so for example, 70% deflation. So when you have 50% or anything like that, it doesn't change the weight because it's 50% of the wing, so the pilot doesn't move much. So the whole thing that gets a roll is a transference of weight. And that's what drops the glider 90 degrees, then it goes face down and accelerates. So when you go to 70%, you're transferring all the weight into the deflation, which very quickly drops 90 degrees. The leading edge goes nose down, and then it accelerates round. Now, what we're testing here is, in that drop in, does the glider continue going round? And it should recover to a flyable state within one rotation, all the way around, and it should climb out and gently drop into a flyable state where any other pilot will just react by pumping the brakes and getting the deflation out. Now, when you talk about passive and active flying, it's a big, when you're testing, for example, you have to do the deflation and sit and lean into it. And like a sack of potatoes, you just lean in and it goes around and it recovers itself to a, whether it's spontaneous recovery, these are the key, or pilotable flights. These are the words you have to watch out for when reading a test report. But it should recover to a state where it will fly. It might still have a tipping, but it will be flying okay. That's your low end B. But a high end B, if you did that, it might go round, it might continue. But the minute it starts to need proper pilot input to get it out, that goes up to a C and further. But it doesn't say, it's more dynamic, the higher end B. So it doesn't mean that you could have it so that 70% pilot leans in and it goes around and it can stay in. It doesn't mean it will never stay in. It can still stay in. So you have to be active on your brakes. You can't think, well, I've just bought a B, so I'm safe. You're not. You have to still fly it. Even a B, low end B, you have to still fly it. You can't rest on, blame some test report and say, well, he said it's safe. You always have to fly it yourself. But it makes it easier to fly a high end B or low end B than a C or D. But yeah, all pilots have to actively fly, but it does make it safer. But it makes it more numb and it makes it more slower when the lower you go. So it's all about where you are in your learning. And we change. Like I've gone down to Bs whilst I'm still guiding, because your confidence goes up and down. And so it's about understanding your skill set and your confidence.
Thank you so much for the answer.
Pleasure, Usha.
Okay, great. Next we have Anukul Set with a question for you, Jocky. I'm just checking out where I can unmute them.
Yeah.
Hi, Jocky.
Hello, Anukul Set.
Hi. So I'm a very beginner pilot. All right. I've just started flying solo. When would you recommend beginners like us or me to start taking or even thinking about an SIV course? Should I put in a minimum, maybe 50 hours of flying or 60 or even 10 will do, you know, just on that frequency? Because I've very recently started, just got my own kit, stuff like that. Like you can imagine, just completely new to the game.
Okay, we have a sort of minimum, which is 10 hours post your license. So we get to a club pilot level. So that means you're able to go onto a site, assess the conditions, and fly yourself if no one is around. So you have to be that good, and that's the start of your flying. And all that time you're in a school, and you get about an hour, 2 hours air time. So you're starting with that, and so 10 hours after that you can consider an SIV. But it's about your frame of mind. If you are hungry to learn, and you're a blank canvas, and you love this sport, and you're flying a glider that's suitable, so an A or a low end B, then you could do an SIV with low hours, because you're gonna, one, let the glider do the work, which is Bhushan's question, and two, let the instructor let the glider and you do the work, so it's easier. And when you're a blank canvas, when you do it at a very early stage in your flying career, it's actually easier because you do exactly what the instructor tells you. And so when he says brake, you brake because he just told you to do it. And he knows what he's talking about, or she knows what they're talking about. The later you leave it, the more your instinctive flying kicks in and you ignore the instructor. And that sometimes causes a problem. And if you are a sponge of positivity, learning, and it's fantastic, it's playtime, you're enjoying all this, all these stalls are fun, this is great, the spiral recovery, deflation's got their fun, it's so easy to pull them out. It's a positive spin on something. And that's why we don't hold people back. If they feel as though they want to learn, then we don't stop them. If they come to us and they say things like, I think I have to do one, then we say, well, maybe that's not quite right because you're in the wrong frame of mind. So it's about, so the earlier, generally, the easier they are to teach. So yeah, I would, if you love it and you want to learn more, then do one early, because you'll understand that the instructor will teach you the subtlety of flying paragliders. And that's what you may not understand yet. And that's what an SIV course will teach you. So if it's all fantastic, go do one. And the instructor will always say, oh, hang on, you know, your reaction time is maybe slow, and he'll tone down the SIV tasks. He'll tone down it and turn it more into pilotage course rather than SIV. So the instructor, a good instructor, will be able to recognize, okay, you know, we can't rely on his skill set getting him out or the glider getting you out. So the instructor will then change the course or the flight program so that you can really enjoy the maneuvers and learn from them without having this high pressure curve tipping at the top. So, you know, yeah, I would do one.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jocky.
Pleasure.
Great. Okay, next we have a question from Rohit. Should be on in a second.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Rohit.
Oh, great. Hey, Jocky.
You look like a DJ, Rohit.
All right. By the way, I'm a big fan and I've been following your videos. I have the DVD set. But if I study your DVD set today, when you say ENB in your safety in flight, those are usually a nice middle ENBs with a decent aspect ratio.
Yes.
The world has changed quite since then. You have ENBs likes of MacPara, Iran, or Air Design Rise. Some of them are hitting aspect ratio of 6. But still some of them are very comfortable. And then some of the low aspect ratio wings are quite spicy. So I just would like to hear your thoughts on, in your experience, you do so many SIVs, what difference do you see actually in those maneuvers between these high aspect ratio Bs and sometimes you can have much more spicier low aspect ratio beam?
Yeah, you can. With a higher aspect ratio, you can tend to get a few more cravats that are lazy cravats. They're not pulling, but they're just irritating to get out, things like that. So you always have to say as a pilot, is this problem taking me off course? Do I need to deal with it? Or is it just an irritating issue? But yeah, with the spicier lower aspect Bs, it's just a question of controlling the roll. But yeah, I would say it's about, yeah, control the roll and control the pitch, but it's not. The Bs generally a lot easier to fly. And the difference between the high aspect ratio ones, just lazier to inflate the tips. That's all really. And understanding a little bit more about the pressure points on roll. That's all.
So nothing to really be afraid of, that little bit higher aspect ratio if it's qualified as B, right?
I would always say, I have to be caution here, you have to be respectful of it. No manufacturer ever wants to design a glider that is not suitable for the pilot he or she has designed it for. And this is the worst scenario. And this is why pilots should not use the classification B to make a decision on buying it, because that's wrong. You should do the research. You should listen to people, not just the person selling it to you, but you should look at reviews and make an independent decision. A lot of people like to blame, oh, I got a B, so I'm safe. No, that's not the case. You still have to fly it. And as you perfectly pointed out, you get bees that are spicy and not spicy. So you read up and you think, well, I like that. And it might be spicy because it's faster in roll. And pilots often like that. They like that active flying. They like that brake pressure. And you might be that it's quite light on brake pressure and you don't like that. You feel as though you've got no resistance. So all manufacturers design in different ways. And you have to, for example, when Jin brought out the Carrera and other ones, they brought out that designing it for a glider. And Jin had it, the pilot in mind. And it was perfect for that pilot. High end, you know, it's just starting competitions, doing some cross countries. And this glider is beautiful. And it is a beautiful wing. But what happened was people thought, oh, look at that. That's an easy B, you know, and they made the mistake. They blamed the B and it got a bad reputation. And it shouldn't have had, because it was stunning for the pilots it was designed for. So you've got to think, well, is that me? You know, I like the look of that wing. I like the reports I'm getting. It looks good in the air. It performs well. And then you've got to say, you've got to look at the handling. And that's the key of buying a glider, I think. Because you can, you know, certain manufacturers like certain things, like advanced like light, and ozone like getting good feel. So quite heavy in the brake input. And you're looking at the brake input as you're applying it, because it goes heavy, then light, then so you're looking at the movement of brake and the roll. And it's all that subtlety that you have to research. But don't ever buy a glider, just think B, tick, I'll have that, because that's wrong. The onus should be on the pilot to make the right decision, not the classification.
Perfect. Many thanks.
Thank you. Rohit.
You good to carry on, Jocky?
Yes. Is everybody
Okay,
good
great.
to carry on?
Yes.
Next, we have a question from Stanzin.
Yeah, hello. Hi.
Hi, Stanley.
Oh, very good afternoon, sir. Indeed, very privileged to be seeing you here in this session. And my question will be regarding the, while doing some maneuver in the air and the mid-air choking. So while doing a maneuver, pilot, he probably gets in some choking and all. So did you ever encounter or heard something about this?
Choking.
Yeah. Choked up
I think you
the
mean,
wind.
do you mean choking?
Yeah.
Like freezing up.
Choking,
not really.
you mean
Yeah, not really. Yeah. Esophagus pipe and the windpipe, right? Like while doing some maneuver and is it possible for a pilot to get in some blocking of that windpipe while doing that maneuver? For instance, the spiral and all?
Okay. Not choking.
Yeah.
I mean, they vomited.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The biggest problem with spiral dives or any high G maneuvers is blacking out, not choking. So we have a big now for SIV. I mean, Debu and all the SIV instructors will agree. The biggest concern for us is blacking out, especially during maneuvers, because if a pilot blacks out and the glider does not recover out of a spiral, then it'll stay in. And blacking out, you don't have any idea that it's coming. So the first signs are you lose color because your color cones in your eyes go. You see tunnel vision or stars. But sometimes it could just go boom, like that. So if you have low blood pressure, things like that, you've got to be careful of it.
Okay.
But this only occurs in high G maneuvers. So if you're doing spirals or big recoveries from a spiral exit, things like that, then you could black out momentarily. But choking, no, I haven't known of it. There are also issues with your body. So for example, doing a sat, you have a lot of force on shoulders, so you can get dislocations, things like that. So you've got to be aware of, and also stalling it's easy. The forces are actually physically easy, but because you're unsure of the pressure points and everything, where your arms are, you can get pull on your elbows here. So you had any surgery, things like that, or you feel weakness, you don't do the maneuvers again, because that's when your hand will go up and the glider will shoot. But other than that, no, we generally say to people, if you're on any medication that says do not operate complicated machinery, or if you have low blood pressure or anything like that, then we do high G maneuvers in a gentle sequence. So we do tight 360s to start and then recover, because tight 360, the leading edge is not facing the ground, it's here, and you get used to the forces. And then we do an asymmetric tuck, roll in 360 and release. And that actually does go nose down, but when you let go of it, it comes straight out. And that teaches the pilot a tolerance. And if the pilot comes back and says, whoa, 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 I went, whoa, then they don't continue. But then also in spirals, there's ways of releasing the G-force by doing an asymmetric tuck on one side and spiraling the other. So there's techniques to avoiding it. But the key is recognize as a pilot where your strengths and weaknesses are. So if you've blacked out before, you get airsick, then address them. It doesn't mean you should stop doing it. It just means address it.
That means the pilot probably had encounter with some blackout, isn't it?
Yep.
That means the pilot probably had encounter with the blackout and all, not with the choking stuff.
Oh, okay.
If some person encounter with such incident while choking in the mid-air.
All right. So this happened, did it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So could you elaborate it briefly? What will be the exact loopholes behind this?
Well, I tell you what it is. On the limited information I have, when you go into a spiral dive or a type 360, you increase your G-force, you increase your load. So locked in spiral will give you a G-force of 3G or 3 to 4G. So that's 4 times your body weight, 4 times the load. So if you imagine that pressure on your chest, your head, already our heads are very heavy, and our muscles in our necks are there to keep them like that. But now they're 3 times the weight. So your neck's trying to support this. So if you look around like this, you'll pull muscles in your neck. So it's a question of keep your body in one position and wait for the pressure to come out. So if this person once in a tight 360 would experience feeling of choking, can't breathe because of the pressure. And that's possibly what they'll be explaining. But the minute you pull out of the G and recover from the spiral, then that pressure will come off. And that feeling of choking, breathlessness, and everything will go because you're back to normal G-force. But yeah, we have to be very careful. Teaching spirals, we do several maneuvers before we do a spiral to see and gauge if the pilot is capable or physically capable of doing it.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. And one more question. So why, since you have conducted so many countless SIV, and while you're conducting SIV, do you let the pilot to give his own input, or you put your own 100% command on the pilot?
No.
What is the ratio between that?
Well, it's we're paid to give our input, but it's a bit like parenting. The more you leave the pilot to do it and learn from it themselves, the better. That's when they'll learn. And what we do is we say, look, we brief the maneuver, we visually brief the maneuver, and we make sure all pilots understand what the maneuver they're going to do. What we generally do is we do it together for starters. So we'll say, okay, pull the riser now, and left brake, left weight shift, roll gently out, good, and pump out the brakes, whatever. We talk, and they do it. And the key is when we say, okay, do a series of those in your own time, because that means they're doing it in and out in silence without the instructor. And that is when it goes into their brain and it becomes instinctive. You're teaching your brain to respond, not motor response, not to the instruction that the instructor is giving, because that's just motor, it just goes in, you do it. The key is making them do it and recover on their own. And then, so we do, so okay, we talk, and then we talk less and less. And the idea is at the end, they get in and out on their own of every maneuver. And that is when they really benefit, because, you know, to watch someone enter and exit a stall beautifully without me saying a word, whew, I've done my job. But you haven't done your job if you're permanently left, right, like that.
Okay. Indeed. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time.
Can I interrupt
Really
here?
appreciate it.
Sorry, I think we need to go on to the next one because they're queuing up, Jocky.
Okay.
And that was quite a long one.
Sorry.
Next, we have Kartik. Kartik with a question for you. Yeah, everyone, if we can, yeah, let's try and keep it to one question. I know Jocky's in big demand, but let's try and keep it to one question so that everyone gets a chance.
Hi, Jocky. Big fan.
Kartik.
Hi, Kartik.
Just want to get your thoughts on, as you call it, the boogeyman, the stall. Now, it is a boogeyman for me, as you term it. Now, would it be better for me to do an SIV on a yearly basis, or I'm flying basically, say, 20 to 50 hours per year, which is not much. So yearly basis SIV, or would it be more hour dependent? What would be your input on that?
So you're doing 20 to 50 hours a year?
Possibly a little more than that, depending upon how work allows me to do it.
No, it's a difficult one, this one, because of course, if you had the time and the money, an SIV course every year would be brilliant. But people don't, and you shouldn't feel pressured to do an SIV course all the time. I would say returning, when the person does the first SIV, there's so much to learn. They're just reacting to the instructor, and they just, whoa, I got through it. Whew, you know, I survived. The second one, they're starting to learn, they're starting to do their own thing, they're starting to learn themselves and pilot themselves. And the third, they're now choosing, right, I want to perfect this, I want to develop this. And so the evolution, the learning curve is beautiful. But you don't have to do it every year. And with stalls are good. They reboot the system. And once you've done several, they become easier and easier. And I will stall a glider if I'm feeling nervous, because we all feel nervous. If I were to stall a glider and recover it, then my confidence soars, because I know, right, I've got this in check. And what you're actually also doing is you're reassuring your chimp that you're in control of the situation. And it increases your heart rate and increases your performance. So, you know, sometimes you just need to get it out of your system. And just say to yourself, stalls are fun. That's it.
All right. Thanks a ton.
Pleasure. Debu's busy.
Okay, great. Jocky, do you want to carry on with questions, or you want to add something from your side, or you want, you know, is there any content you want to add?
No, keep going.
Yeah. Okay, we keep going. Next, we got Lakshman with the next question.
Hi, Jocky.
Should be up in a
Hi,
sec.
Lakshman.
My question is, a lot of people are doing SIV every year, and some people are improving SIV, they are controlling and everything, but some people are not in good control. After SIV, they decrease their level. How they are, what to say, not get a good control on that glider?
Yeah, there are some pilots that, well, they shouldn't be flying. But the more SIVs you do, if your glider control gets worse after doing SIV, then something's wrong. You're either losing confidence or you're losing understanding of the wing. And therefore you should change your wing. And a lot of people in the beginning used to feel that they ought to fly a glider because they're an instructor or they're experienced, so therefore they have to fly a glider that's good. And they didn't enjoy it because they were hitting it, they weren't flying that current and they were getting nervous, and therefore their performance and handling gets worse. So in those scenarios, you have to treat yourself as an athlete and operate within your arousal zone. So you can be in a comfortable zone, and if you want to perform and learn it and do well, you've got to go in the arousal zone. But if you go further than that, you start to tip over, and it degrades your learning, and it increases your insecurity, and it doesn't allow you to perform. So if you were doing lots of SIV, but you just weren't controlling the wing and weren't enjoying it and weren't reactive enough, then I would go down and fly a glider, go from a C to a B, for example, and get back into enjoying it, flying it, and feel confident in it. And what you'll find is when your confidence comes back up, and you'll feel that the glider is holding you back. It's holding you back a bit. I want to go further. That's when you change. Not when you think you should or when your experience says you should. You change a glider when you feel this one is now holding me back. I love it. It's served a good purpose. It's given me security and made it fun. But now it's holding me back. Now I'm ready to go back up again. And that's what we do. We all do that, all the time. We have very short peaks and troughs in confidence and ability, and very long, deep ones through our career. And you have to, as a pilot, recognize when they're coming and address them. If you go in denial, then you'll have an accident and you won't enjoy it, and you'll give up flying. So, doing an SIV is great. It gives you that confidence. But if it isn't doing, then change something.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Great. Yeah, that was an interesting one. Next, we have Omkar.
Hi, Jocky.
Hi, Omkar.
See you
How are
again.
you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Great. I have a question for you. I'm going to describe a behavior, and I would like to know your input on that to understand what is happening exactly there. I tried searching a bit. I couldn't find any satisfactory answers. I kind of got used to with the glider behavior and got to deal with it, but I need your input on that. So I have got this new wing, BGD Epic, last year. And what I noticed is that while entering into the thermals and while trying to turn inside the thermal, as soon as the wing hits the thermal, it starts banking more and more. And I have an inside brake applied while entering into the thermal in certain turn direction, like for example, right side turning. As the glider hits the thermal, the banking starts increasing, and it kind of starts turning, the turn speed starts increasing slowly at around 30 to 40% brake, at 30 to 40% brake. So what I do is that I ease off the brake pressure a bit and try to apply slightly outer brake and keep it in control to keep circling. But this behavior is very peculiar. I didn't notice this behavior in my earlier wing, which was Epsilon 5, which was fairly old wing. So what exactly is happening here?
Yeah, it's about the glider and its roll. So the Epic, I'm not sure about line lengths, but it might be longer and roll you in. But it's this roll. So if you apply brake and start a turn, the glider will either drop into the turn, or there'll be a pendulum that's holding you back, okay? And so what you're doing is when you're thermaling, you don't want the leading edge to be facing the ground because that's inefficient. But you don't want to be pulling out and being pushed out of the thermal either. And your description of applying the brake 30% and accelerating without fully seeing what you mean it sounds to me like you're dropping into a deeper turn, steeper bank. Now, if you ease off that inside brake, as you say you're doing, then immediately that glider will start to flatten out. If you apply the other brake, it will climb out and it will be completely inefficient. What you've got to do is balance the difference between both hands. And so going into the thermal and keeping the bank on, but raking the leading edge back with the outside brake is also what you've got to do. So this one will drop the leading edge in. Okay, this one will keep the leading edge back, but a similar angle of bank. So it makes it a bit more efficient. So you'll find that the inside will be almost set, and it's the outside that polices your level of bank. So if you want to, you keep in the thermal and you'd flatten out a little bit and drop in, but you stay sort of smooth and consistent between the two. What you're describing is you're going in with this one, it drops in, then you're letting go of this one, pulling this one, whoop, it's pulling out. So it's too responsive, too aggressive. You've got to make those transitions smoother. I think that's what the answer is.
Okay, yeah, that's what I have been trying to do, to try to put a little pressure on the outer side so that it doesn't fully come out, but it tries to stay in at the same time and not increase the banking anymore.
Yeah, so you would keep this inside brake on, and you'd have a little bit more of this one just to sort of flatten it out subtly and come back in. So generally, this is my flying. I mean, a lot of pilots are different. They like to talk about cadence and things like that, but balancing, if I was in a thermal and it's really good and I'm coring, then this one stays quite thick. This one just brings me flatter or lets me drop in more subtly. So it's the outside brake that controls that. It's 360.
Okay.
But the minute you release the inside, it wants to climb out. Then you've got to get it back in, and it's all a bit messy and inefficient. So it's that smooth subtlety between the two. And that movement of your hands is constant, but you must make sure your goal is to keep the glider as smooth as possible. So whatever that takes to maintain that smooth fluidity is important. So forget saying 30%, forget black and white figures, do whatever it takes to keep that wing smooth and that cadence, that balanced turn all the way around as smooth and fluid as possible. The minute it starts to pitch and roll, you're inefficient. So keep it smooth.
Okay, thanks for that. Does this get affected by the fact that I am almost fully loaded on the glider?
Yeah.
With, say, 3 kilos under the max weight.
Yeah, your Epsilon, you're probably light on, and your Epic, you're probably heavy on. So the difference is humongous. So your Epsilon is also advanced design, so it's nice and soft and very passive, very gentle. And because you are light on it, your adverse yaw is more. And so when you apply brake, you actually go the other way. And so it's very slow to go in, and then it drops 90, then it gently picks up, and then you're gently in. Whereas the Epic, you apply brake, whoop, it's in. Totally different.
Yeah. Yes.
They're both good, but they both require different piloting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Arun with a question. You there, Arun?
Hey, morning, Jocky.
Morning, Arun.
Hey, morning. I have a question about manuals. Do you have any set of manuals reserved for low-end wings and set of manuals reserved for the high-end? And why you prefer to do one on the other and not on the other one?
For what? What do you want to achieve out of the gliders?
Is there any maneuver that you prefer not to do on one glider and the other one, and vice versa?
Oh, okay. Maneuvers for, I think all maneuvers, you have to be flexible, but they have different vices. And so But what you've got to remember is when you have a high-end glider, you should have a high-end pilot. And so the way you coach and teach them is totally different with a low-end pilot on a low-end glider. So the maneuvers, although they're similar, we evolve different things. So when you get to flying good B-wing, you know, two-liners, things like that, we teach a totally different style of teaching. You know, we don't do full stalls with two-liners. You do, you know, you learn to stall one side and not the other. You know, there's subtleties of training. One interesting one is when we do, for example, turn reversals, getting people used to dropping into a 360 one way, which the beginning is getting a pilot used to the yaw stability. And then when they pull out and climb, it's about timing and dropping into the next turn. And then it's roll stability and controlling bank. The more beginner the wing, the easier that is, the quicker it is to do a turnaround. It's under 20 seconds. The more high aspect ratio it is, the longer the lines, the slower that is. So it's slower to get the angle, a bank established. It's more elegant, but there are tricks to it. So learning the spin point, recognizing the brake dropping, and then letting it dive and using that dive to turn tighter is all that subtlety of training that a pilot of that standard can quite easily cope with. So yeah, it's all the maneuvers. There's no favorites. They all benefit. They've all evolved to enable the pilot to understand the glider more and get the most out of the glider that they're flying. Does that answer your question, Adam?
Got it. Thank you.
Great. You're good to carry on, Jocky? You're
Yeah,
okay?
as long as everyone else is.
Yeah. Okay, great. Next, we have Apurv with a question for you, Jocky.
Apurv
should be coming up any second. Apurv, are you there?
Hello. Hi, Jocky.
Here he is.
Thanks.
Hi, Apurv.
Hi. So my question is, what are the differences in active flying a hammock style pod versus a pod with a seat plate, especially in terms of your body movement for example, recovering a spin or weight shifts during a collapse? Do you have any tips for a pilot moving onto a hammock style pod in an active flying environment? Thank you.
Whew, that's a good one. Apurv, so do you fly with a pod already?
No, so I actually just got a harness right before the lockdown happened, and that's my first pod, and it's a hammock. Before that, I was flying a seat, an open harness with a seat plate. So I got an advanced lightness, which most people said was suitable for a beginner pod. So yeah.
Okay, you'll notice the hammock. If you think of the theory of it all, when you have a seat plate, you have, so that's a solid seat plate, and you have mailons here and here. So your leverage, your movement with the wing is the same, should be parallel. And if you have a hammock and you have the two mailons here and going, then theoretically you're sliding within it and you're not moving the mailons and levering or using the weight shift. But in reality, that when you're dealing with sitting back and you don't have the leverage of sitting up, because when you're sitting up, you have leverage of weight. There's not that much difference in a seat plate and a hammock. And also, when you're flying thermaling and you're sitting in your pod, your cadence, your balance of the 360 should be smooth enough that you and the glider are traveling together anyway. And so weight shift, leverage isn't necessarily that important because you're moving together. In both cases, if you have a big deflation or big turbulence, then yeah, in all cases you sit up with pods because you want your body between the mailons and you want to move with the glider as it establishes speed, because speed is maneuverability and maneuverability is safety. It gets you out of the problem. So when it's turbulent, you always sit up in your pod, unless you're comfortable with the turbulence. It's up to you. But if you're having a situation of deflation or anything you need to control the wing, you sit up. That's why acro pilots are sat up, because they're going with the wing as it goes. And if you lie down and you have the wing starts to turn, then you're turning slower than the wing, and very quickly 90 degrees turns into 180 degrees, and you have a twist. So you've got to sit up and go with the glider, bleed out the roll, and get the glider back into recovery. But as far as fine tuning between a seat plate pod and a hammock pod, there isn't that much difference as long as the pilot and the glider are flying together. The difference occurs when the pilot's not really flying the wing properly and they're being pushed around. So it's all about balance and cadence. But you'll love the advanced lightness has got quite a stiff plate. It's not completely hammocky. So there is a modicum of weight shift, a modicum of movement with the Melons. So it's not as hammocky as some are. Does that answer your question, Debu?
It does. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Cool. Next we have Jobin. You should be here. Jobin.
Hi. Hi, sir. Good evening. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, Jobin.
Hi. Sir, ideal wind for practicing maneuvers like wingovers and spirals. Any restrictions for any maneuvers for wind strength, like wind strength? Any restrictions for maneuvers like ideal wind for wind? For what? Like
wind or wing?
Maneuvers. Ideal wind for practicing maneuvers.
Oh,
for that?
We only test, for example, it has to be non-thermic and very little winds to be objective, because you have to say that we did this and the glider did this in this wind. So it has to be non-thermic, because you can have turbulence and it gives a completely different reaction to a wing. And doing SIV, we don't like strong winds because not necessarily the handling of a wing, because it's normally laminar over a lake. But it's if the pilot goes in the water, then they go in and the parachute then stays above the water and it drags the pilot underneath the water. It's very dangerous. So you don't want to do maneuvers in strong winds. But if they're laminar and there's a technique to getting the reserve down quickly, like for example, Como, they have 2 reserve rescue boats that they're trained to get the reserve down quick and stuff like that. But if you're flying yourself and you want to just practice maneuvers, then I would put caution to that, because it's a difficult one. You should always push yourself, push your learning, but make sure you've got enough height underneath you and you've got a good skill set to cope with it. You're not learning anything new. But the ideal wind is as calm as possible. As calm as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Next we have a question from Kalin Popa. Hello, Kalin.
Hello, and hello, Jocky.
Hello,
Hey, I would like to ask you a question, Jocky, about, it's just a little detail about blacking out. So, because there's been so much talk about this, and I did follow training at the GeForce trainer, and I noticed something interesting, that, okay, the phases are graying out, blacking out, and passing out.
Yeah.
And I've noticed for myself, after 3 seconds at 4 Gs, I'm blacking out, so I can't see anything. But I can continue up to 7.5 Gs and stay at 7.5 Gs up to 1 minute without being able to see anything. So I've noticed the same problem on other colleagues of mine, that blacking out does not equal passing out. and that you can keep your consciousness even though the vision is gone. And I wanted to ask you the question, what do you know about this, and how much should we tell the students about this difference between blacking out and passing out?
Well, I'll tell you something, I wouldn't like to be in control of a glider that's in a cravated spiral with a twist and not be able to see. I would. So we're looking at this as an application for paragliding. If you are total, that's really good awareness, that you're aware of at what point you black out. You don't often go much past 3 to 4G in normal flight, you know, spiral flight anyway. But the things to do with the GER, did they talk about the muscles, making sure you tense all your muscles and limited head movement in the G-force trainer?
Yeah, of course. And of course you need it to stay for a long time above 7 Gs. But the question is, should we tell our students that blacking out, not being able to see, does not equal passing out, that they can still keep control over their body, of course keeping tension and so on? Or do you think that just avoiding as much as possible the point of blacking out is sufficient and the students don't need to know?
Yeah, I would say, if that's the question, yeah, definitely keep it simple. And I don't want either. So blacking out, passing out, I wouldn't like to have either happen to a student. So keep it simple and tell them not to go into it. And if they recognize the onset of it, to pull out and to get back to normal flight as soon as possible. Because, you know, that's our worst nightmare, is to have someone who's, one, has completely passed out, and two, that has blacked out. So both scenarios are bad. Although the one where you can't see, at least you can still do stuff. And it comes back. As soon as you release the G, it comes back. So you can still control. But yeah, I would almost categorize them. There's need to know and nice to know, isn't there, when you're teaching? So they need to know not to get in it, to recognize it and not go in it. And then there's nice to know, which is more detail about it. And it depends on the student how much detail you want to go into it. But as far as need to know is, just avoid it. So treat them both as the same.
Okay, thank you, Jocky.
Thank you. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have, you know, we're teaching, we have onboard cameras, GoPros on some of the pilots, depending on what they want from their tuition. And you can see spiral dives as an instructor. You know, you can see me teaching a guy to drop into the spiral. It all is great. And the pilot, clearly on the onboard camera, passes out. But he passes out with a glider that doesn't stay in a spiral. So as soon as he passes out, his arm goes limp, the glider pulls straight out, and he recovers beautifully with no deflations, transferring all that downward energy into climbing energy, 360, no tip tuck, roll forwards and out. And you can hear me on the radio saying, excellent recovery. And this guy has gone from flying like this to, once it recovers, waking up going, what? And you can hear me going, well done, that was brilliant. He did nothing. The glider did it all. And so imagine if you flew a glider that didn't come out. That's the issue. So you've got to learn. It doesn't matter if the glider does stay in. Gliders do have a tendency to stay in. They can. I would say 30% at the moment of pilots have a glider that stay in spiral dive once it's established lockdown. And that number is going to get, as gliders evolve again, that number will get less. But being a pilot flying a glider that does stay in or can stay in, you have to be aware of, right, I have to be aware of my aircraft. This one is likely to stay in. So therefore, what's my answer to that? One, maybe not go into it. Maybe just do tight 360. Have a different strategy and be more respectful of the blackout point. Because, you know, if it goes in and you do black out, then that's it. So, you know, understanding your aircraft is key as well to your, not only your ability to control it, but the glider's ability to get out.
Thank you, Jocky.
Pleasure.
Great. Okay, Jocky, we've got another 3 questions, and then we're going to call this. Yeah.
Okay.
You good with that?
I'm very good with that.
Great. Our next question is from Vijay Soni. Hi, Vijay. Nice beard.
Hi, Jocky.
Hey, Vijay.
Yeah, I am following you from last 25 years since I started my flying and watching you on the instability and all. So very keen to know when you did your first SIV and who was your instructor?
Oh, I made it up. I didn't do it. I did do when we did the testing, when all the countries got together, and I was completely, I didn't know what I was doing. They just said, you'll do it. So off I went. And I was with Andy Eidegger, who is an amazing pilot. And he, Paratech, and very skillful. And Alan Zoller. And flying with these guys taught me a lot, taught me a great deal. And I treated that as a course for me. I was learning off them. Because, yeah, I did all the tests. And I worked for Akpels, temporarily after that. And obviously for the BHPA. But that, for me, was a great course. Doing stalls and stuff like that and learning for the first time was brilliant. But sharing it with people like that was fantastic. But doing the first stall, for example, I did on my first ever flight because I didn't know what it was. And I was told to pull down the brakes if I wanted to stop it. I was in the air and I wanted to stop it. So I pulled both brakes down and it stalled. I thought, I let both brakes up and it dived. And so I learned in the first flight doing SIV. So, but one thing I would say, a course, always have empathy with the person, the student doing it. Always, as instructors, we sometimes lose that connection because we think, oh, it's easy. You can just do this. It's simple. When it isn't, always remember what it was like when you did your first stall and your first, scary maneuver. I always do. I always remember to respect what a student is going through. I imagine myself sat alone on Annecy takeoff, having to do my first stalls, a grey overcast day, absolutely terrified. So you always think that's me, and that's the same as this guy who's just about to do it now. And you have to have that empathy. Otherwise you lose connection.
I have the same story. Like I have never done the SIV, but I have self-learned, self-taught, went through blackout, everything. And the day I want to start it, I was on 2-liner and nobody was teaching on the 2-liner. I want to know, do you take SIV course on the CCC 2-liner wing?
We do. What we focus more on, we don't do that program, the normal program. It just, you throw the book away. And it's all about a glider that's already flying 2-liners already knows how to fly. And in fact, can do it all. It's about coaching. And one thing we have learned is when you have such a high aspect wing like this, we teach it at the beginning. We teach it in SIV maneuvers where we do a big collapse, 50%, and the initial roll in, the transference of weight, rolls the pilot in. But if the pilot weight shifts or maintains course or stability, then very quickly the pilot then pendulums under the flying side of the wing, and the deflation stays in. But the minute the pilot swings under the flying side of the wing, the physics change. And the glider thinks, well, I'm flying now. I've just got no wing. It doesn't matter, but because all the forces come underneath the flying wing. And once you're established in that, then there's no pull or very little pull. And it's understanding that subtlety, because pilots often see a big deflation and they haven't been pulled because they've already centered under the flying wing, and they overbrake and it stalls and spins the other way. Whereas if you don't, you fly the aircraft you've got. And when you're flying two-liners, it's about doing that, amplified. And so you can have a cravat on your right side. And so you hold your left side. Your whole body swings under the left side. Now, this right side is irrelevant because your weight, everything is flying under the good side. Now you can almost stall that side, sweep it right back, clear the cravat, and then carry on flying. And it's understanding you can move all your weight under the good wing, stall and get rid of that, and then come back under both wings. It's teaching people that they've got two wings above their heads, and that sort of subtlety, as well as obviously searching for spins, searching for maneuvers, and not being afraid of it. You know, keeping it in that deep stall point, bringing it up, bringing it back down, and being active, not letting it sweep back and have cravats and close, and not letting it dive and cravat in front. And it's that muscle memory is immense once you've got it, and it's actually becomes quite easy. And you're doing it, you know, when you're in the world, you were doing that all the time in strong thermals, all the time. And it's associating a clinical environment of a SIV area with no thermals, no wind, and you're doing this suddenly in silence, but you've been doing that all the time in thermals. And you know, you're in a thermal and it spins and you just ease off the brake a bit, catch it, instinctively doing it. And it's understanding, you know, the difference between the two, and that you've already got it in control. You do an SIV course every time you fly your two-liner without thinking, because they're beautiful wings, and the confidence you have in your ability enables you to control the wing. And it's all about speed, the speed to react, but the speed to back off as well when you don't need it. And it's like, it's as simple as that, really. And with two-liners, that's what we're teaching generally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Jocky. Next, we have Naveen Chetri. Naveen.
Hello, hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello, Naveen.
Yeah.
Hello, hi.
That's a rocking hat, Naveen.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm very big fan of you. I have seen lots of videos of yours, and my favorite one is the security in flight, in which you said that rule number 1 is break the dive, and I have used it a lot in my flights. When I am in turbulent, I just keep saying to myself that when anything happens, just I have one thing to do first. It's break the dive. In the beginning, it helped me a lot, and thanks a lot for that. Okay. So my question is, how to load up the wing during the SIV? Like my wing is certified between 85 kg to 105 kg. So I usually fly around 98 or 99 sometimes, because I carry some stuff like blast, water, or other stuff with me when I'm generally flying in the mountains. But while doing SIV, usually I will not carry that stuff. So there will be difference of around 8 kg, maybe 10 kgs. So if that behavior might change, like I have done the SIV 10 kg more, and now if I'm flying in real condition, fully loaded up, and things can got really change and surprise me, then that weight category, this one.
Yeah, 10 kilos. What changes is the dynamic aspect of the wing. So the heavier you are, the quicker it will react, which is a good thing because you have control. Bad thing if you're slow on your reaction, i.e. you don't break your dive, then it can have a problem. But you've always got to remember that maneuverability is safety, because the more maneuverable you are, the safer you are. So you just use that. So the higher your weight, the more quickly it will drop in to the turn. But you can, as soon as you pull on both brakes to get pressure, so you feel both sides, you can then decide whether to apply outside brake to roll out or ease off inside brake. It depends, because you might want to keep the turn on and flatten it out with both brake transition. It just makes the dynamic aspect, the higher the wing loading, the more dynamic the wing will be. And you know, the calmer it'll be on speed. With a lighter wing, you tend to find that things happen a bit slower, and the drop in takes a little bit longer. And sometimes you have to ease off the brake, let it dive, use that dive to reapply the brake, and then turn again. And that's when you have that's when you know you're too light on a wing. So it's that there's between 10 kilograms is not much difference.
Okay.
But what you do find is you have adverse roll. So with a pod, if you're flying along like that, and you apply brake, when you apply brake, you actually create lift on this side, okay? And so initially, as you apply brake, you actually turn this way. So I've applied brake on the right, I'll start turning to the left because it's created lift on that side and it turns that way. If you keep applying it, obviously the drag slows it down and off you go into the turn. But people have to understand that, especially when they get light on a wing, because it happens more obviously. But the heavier you are, the quicker it rolls in.
Okay, thank you. And I have a hello.
Hello.
Yes, and I have a small quick question. Like, what kind of effect the wing will have after SIV, like high G maneuver forces and everything? If I do a SIV on a wing, should I need to recheck the trim and everything? So if it's a new wing, like I bought new wing and fly 15-20 hours, and after that do I need to recheck, retrim, or like that?
No, you don't need to. The newer the wing, the less the chances of it going off trim. But what does happen, and we have it, you know, here in the service center, is pilots often favor one side. So they turn to the right, or if they're doing any maneuvers, it depends on your right and your left side of the brain. But you'll feel more comfortable stronger going one way. So people sat to the right or spiral to the right or whatever. And they thermal often. And when you're looking at if you have a look at your track log afterwards, it says the percentage of turning you did to the right, the percentage you did to the left. And you'll be amazed at that. It'll always, 70% right, 30% left. And if you keep doing that, that starts changing the dynamics of the wing. And you notice it on glide, and you'll notice it on speed, because speed amplifies any difference in trim. So you'll notice pulling one way or another. And until it starts to do that, or until it hangs back when you take off, until you start noticing a difference, then I wouldn't worry. One SIV won't do too much to the stretch and degradation of your wing.
Thanks a lot. That's clear, Mitchell. God bless you.
God bless you too.
Great. Okay, Jocky, we've got one final question, which is from Daksha. I'm going to read it out because Daksha hasn't got a mic, so he sent me the question. The question is: some reserves have long lines that are longer than the lines of the glider, and some have lines as long or even shorter than the glider lines. Are shorter line reserves more prone to getting stuck in the glider? And what are the pros and cons each one have?
That is a very good question.
Daksha is a very good pilot.
The thing is, when we do reserve repacks, one of the things we have to say in our measurements is the length of the top of the glider, the top of the dome, all the way down to the riser base. Okay, and that length is important, because what we want to check is that it isn't in the dead zone of a glider. So it isn't so long that it is not going to reinflate in the dead zone. Shorter, personally, I think shorter is slightly better, because I wouldn't worry about it going into the lines, because the glider, when a reserve goes into the lines, you'll find that as long as it's allowed to do its thing and go to full extent, it will open. And it opens through the lines. So, you know, it's gone into the lines, and then you'll see it's gathering a bit of air and inflating itself. If it does actually stay closed in the lines, then pulling it back. And I've had to do this several times. So you throw the reserve. The key is throw it correctly the first time. I'll come back to that. So if it goes into the lines, you just pull it all the way back down. The action of you pulling it often starts to inflate the reserve, and then it takes and goes away and does its thing. And once the reserve comes out, your glider will react to that, and you have this action reaction, and you've got to get your main in. But I would say lower than the main is better in general, shorter lines. We've had there's quite a few cases where hang glider pilots, they've said, oh, I've got a reserve. So they get their reserve, which is still attached to their long bridle, and they throw it, and it goes high. And it's the pendulum, the deflation, the reinflation of the reserve is bad. So it's better to have sort of short lines, opening quickly, and then deactivating the main is generally better.
Okay, great. Thanks for all that, Jocky. I've still got questions coming in. Do we want to do just one more? Because I think it's quite a good one, just to get your point of view. Okay, I've got KK Krishnakant who's asked a question, and I don't know if you watched. Did you watch Russ's interview on XE Mag the other day? I think it was a couple of days ago.
Josh and I discussed it, and it sounded great.
Yeah. Anyway, I watched it. Anyway, KK wants to know, and he says that Russell suggested leaning into the side that's collapsed to keep the glider going. What's your take on that? You know, usually when we teach, we're like lean away, you know, all of that stuff. But what's your take on that?
Well, it's a really interesting concept. And Russ is fantastic for dropping these things in. And then all of us have got to pick up the pieces. He's totally right in that when you have a deflation, if the glider drops in, it's established in a drop in, then yeah, go with it. You've got to go with it. You can't try and resist that because you will twist. He's right. But what Debu and I and all instructors are saying is prevention, not the cure. So what Russ is talking about is it's happened, it's dropped in, you go with it. Yeah, that's true. But if you can, you prevent that happening in the first place, that drop in, that's the leaning away. So you do a thing where if the glider's dropped into the turn, if it's 90 degrees in and it's nose down and it's starting to rotate into 360, then sitting up like an acro pilot and going with it to establish speed, to stop any twists, and then use that speed to maneuver out and exit wherever you want to exit. So you go from a nose down, so that's a spiral effectively. You don't want to pull out immediately because you'll climb out too fast. You might have a secondary dive and a collapse. You want to bleed that energy out, turn it into a tight 360, and then gently come out with the glider climbing up, you gently going back, braking and flying away. So it's about transferring your body to deal with the roll aspect of your wing. So he's right in that once it's happened and dropped in, yeah, go with it and bleed the energy out and turn it into the course and heading you want. So imagine if you're flying along, you had a massive collapse right next to a cliff face, you would go with it. You would minimize the twisting, great. You would clear the cliff. You would then ease gently on the outside brake, transferring away from the cliff and flying away. That's absolutely perfect. But if I was going to a cliff, I would weight shift away from it as I'm going into it, so that if I did have the deflation, it wouldn't take me in the first place. So weight shifting away, and we teach this. We say, right, deflate your wing, but as you deflate it, weight shift away. And so the pilot deflates the wing 50, 60%, but they've already weight shifted the other way. Nothing happens. They immediately swing under the flying wing, and there's no pull anymore. And people with pods have to weight shift into the deflation in order to keep straight, just because of the physics and dynamics of it. And it's that illustration that says, That's why you weight shift away, to prevent being rolled in. But if you are rolled in and it is going dynamic, then yeah, Russ is absolutely right. Go with it and bleed the energy out, because you don't want twists.
Great. Great. Thanks for all of that, Jocky. Really good.
Pleasure. Thank you all
I
for
think,
coming.
yeah. Is there anything else you want to say to leave us there, or are we done? Or you ready for
No,
lunch?
I would say I was listening to a podcast, my first podcast I've ever listened to, actually, and it was of a pilot who was you were guiding him, and he thought, you know, he was at Warwick, and he flew in beer, and one thing that really did strike a chord is pilots don't understand or comprehend active flying and the speed of reacting.
Yeah.
It isn't fear, it's about pilot control. And a lot of pilots who have, if you find yourself having deflations, then you need to fly actively more. And then suddenly you have no deflations and you relax and you flip it. But what I would say is, do the wing justice and learn and enjoy learning more and more about the wing and yourself, and practice everything. Practice maneuvering your wing. So switching from one side, dive the other side, and just learn through play and enjoy it. And by, you know, the fact that you've all sat here listening to me talking for an hour means you're stimulated by it. So as soon as it comes good, get out there and practice, practice, practice.
Great. I'd like to say a really big thank you, Jocky, from all of the Indian flying community, and for taking the time to speak to us all. It's been really great, and I hope to see you soon somewhere when we can go flying at some point this summer.
Yeah, some point this summer will be here
Great.
afterwards.
Okay,
Hope as
thanks.
well. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jocky.
Thanks a lot, Jocky. Thanks, Badri.
Thanks, Jocky.
For explanations and your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jocky. Thank you, Debu.